There is a breathing secret buried in Zen monasteries that many masters refuse to write down. Not because it was mystical, not because it was religious, but because it was considered dangerous knowledge. Dangerous in the sense that once you understand it, you realize how much control you can have over your own mind, your energy, even your fear. For centuries, Zen teachers spoke quietly about a place in the body called the Tanden, a point 2 in below the navel that they described as the true center of human power. Modern science is only beginning to catch up with what these practitioners already knew. The shocking truth is that most people today are breathing in a way that slowly destabilizes their nervous system. Shallow chest breathing, the kind you unconsciously perform while scrolling your phone or sitting in front of a screen, keeps the brain locked in a subtle survival mode. Your heart beats faster. Your stress hormones remain elevated. Your lungs never fully expand. Anxiety becomes your background atmosphere. You think this tension is normal life, but the Zen masters would say you have simply forgotten where your breath truly belongs. I want you to consider something unsettling. What if the center of calm inside your body has been there all along, but modern living trained you to ignore it? What if the difference between constant anxiety and deep internal stability is not therapy, not medication, not endless motivation videos, but a breathing pattern that reconnects the diaphragm, the lungs, and the nervous system to this forgotten center called the Tanden? I have spent years studying the strange overlap between ancient breathing rituals and modern neuroscience labs. And again, one structure keeps appearing in the data: the vagus nerve, the biological command line that controls calm, inflammation, heart rhythm, and emotional balance. The Zen masters did not use that term, but their breathing method targets it with eerie precision. When the breath drops into the lower abdomen, something extraordinary happens. Your nervous system begins to reset itself from the inside. Now, here is where the story becomes almost unsettling, because the mechanism behind tandem breathing is not mystical at all. It is brutally biological. Hidden beneath your ribcage is a muscle that modern people barely use correctly anymore: the diaphragm. Think of it as a biological pump, a pressure engine that controls how oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nerve signals move through the body. When you breathe shallowly into the chest, the diaphragm barely moves. Your lungs inflate only halfway, like a balloon that never fully opens. The brain interprets this incomplete breathing pattern as a signal of danger. The sympathetic nervous system stays active. Stress chemistry continues circulating through your bloodstream. You may not feel panic, but your body is quietly locked in a low-grade alarm state. This is the invisible background anxiety millions of people live with every day. Zen practitioners discovered that when the breath is directed downward into the lower abdomen, the diaphragm begins to descend like a piston. This movement expands the lower lobes of the lungs, the areas richest in blood flow. Oxygen exchange becomes dramatically more efficient. But something even more powerful happens at the neurological level. As the diaphragm moves downward, pressure inside the abdomen gently stimulates branches of the vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in the human body. This nerve is the master switch of the parasympathetic nervous system, the circuitry responsible for calm, digestion, healing, and emotional stability. When vagal tone increases, the heart rate slows, the brain waves shift toward relaxed alpha patterns, and stress chemistry begins to fade. But here is the strange part. Simply breathing deeply is not enough. Many people try deep breathing and feel nothing change because they still breathe from the chest. Tanden breathing targets a very specific zone, 2 in below the navel, what the Zen texts call the body's internal gravity center. When the breath expands this region, the abdomen becomes a pressure chamber that massages internal organs, stabilizes the diaphragm, and sends calming signals through the vagus nerve to the brain. You are not just inhaling oxygen, you are reprogramming the nervous system with every breath. Long before neuroscience laboratories began mapping the vagus nerve or measuring stress hormones, Zen practitioners had already noticed something strange about the human body under pressure. Warriors, monks, and meditators who breathed from the upper chest were easily shaken. Their thoughts scattered, their reactions became erratic, and fear crept into their movements. But there were others, rare individuals who seemed anchored to something deeper. Their breathing was quiet, slow, almost invisible. Their abdomen expanded with every inhale, while their chest remained relaxed. When chaos appeared around them, they did not stiffen. They became even calmer. Zen teachers studied these individuals carefully, and eventually they traced the source of this stability to a point in the lower abdomen they called the Tanden, often translated as the field of elixir, the place where life force could be stored and concentrated. In the old martial traditions of Japan, this discovery became a guarded principle. Masters would tell their students something cryptic. If your mind rises to the head, you lose balance. If your breath sinks to the Tand, your mind becomes immovable. At first, this sounded poetic, almost mystical. But over centuries of observation, they noticed a consistent pattern. When attention and breathing were directed to and below the navel, the entire structure of the body changed. The spine aligned more naturally, the shoulders relaxed, and movements became grounded instead of tense. Fighters could absorb stress without freezing. Meditators could sit for hours without agitation. It was as if the body had discovered its internal anchor point. What fascinates modern researchers is how closely this ancient observation mirrors physiological reality. The lower abdomen is where the diaphragm exerts its strongest mechanical influence, and it sits near dense networks of autonomic nerves connected to digestion, heart rhythm, and emotional regulation. When Zen practitioners breathed into the Tanden, they were unknowingly activating a powerful neurological feedback loop. Pressure from the diaphragm stabilized the nervous system, while slow exhalation amplified vagal signals to the brain. Over time, this created a state that monks described as immovable mind, a calm that could not easily be disturbed by fear, noise, or stress. The secret was never mystical energy. The secret was learning how to breathe from the true center of the body. Now we arrive at the part that most people expect to be simple, but is actually where the real precision begins. The Zen masters were extremely strict about how Tan breathing was practiced, because small mistakes completely cancel the effect. If the chest lifts too much, the nervous system stays in alert mode. If the breath is forced, tension returns to the body. The protocol must feel controlled but effortless, like a slow wave moving through the torso. First, sit or stand with the spine naturally straight, not rigid, not military stiff. Imagine the crown of the head floating upward, while the shoulders soften and fall away from the ears. Place one hand lightly 2 inches below your navel. This point is the tendon. It is not just a location. It is the center where attention and breath must meet. Now inhale slowly through the nose, but do not lift the chest. Instead, allow the diaphragm to descend so the lower abdomen gently expands outward. The sensation should feel like the breath is filling the belly from the inside. Your chest stays almost quiet, while the abdomen becomes the main chamber of movement. Zen texts often describe this as dropping the breath, because the air feels as if it sinks downward, rather than rising upward. As the inhale completes, pause for a brief moment, just 1 second, allowing pressure to stabilize in the lower abdomen. Then comes the most powerful phase. Exhale slowly through the nose while allowing the abdomen to soften inward. Do not push the air out aggressively. Imagine releasing pressure from a valve. The exhale should last slightly longer than the inhale, because this is the phase that amplifies vagus nerve signaling and tells the brain that the body is safe. Keep your awareness resting on the tanden the entire time. Many beginners let their attention drift back into the head, but the calm response only appears when the mind stays anchored in the lower abdomen. Each breath becomes a small neurological reset. Practice this rhythm continuously for 5 minutes. Inhale slowly into the lower abdomen. Brief pause, then long, controlled exhale. As the cycles continue, something subtle begins to change. The chest softens, the heartbeat slows. The mind stops jumping from thought to thought. You are not forcing relaxation. You are allowing the body's deepest control system to take over. What happens next is where many people become skeptical, because the transformation does not feel dramatic at first. There is no lightning strike of enlightenment, no mystical vision. Instead, the change begins quietly, almost mechanically, as if hidden switches inside the nervous system are slowly being recalibrated. Within the first few minutes of practicing tandem breathing, most people notice one immediate shift. The body begins to feel heavier and more stable. The breath drops deeper without effort. The constant background chatter in the mind softens slightly. This is not imagination. It is the parasympathetic nervous system beginning to dominate the stress circuitry that has been running your body for years. After several days of consistent practice, another change appears. Your breathing pattern outside the exercise starts to reorganize itself automatically. You may notice that when stress appears during the day, your breath instinctively drops into the abdomen instead of rising into the chest. This is the nervous system learning a new baseline. The diaphragm becomes stronger and more responsive, expanding the lower lungs more efficiently with every breath. Oxygen delivery improves, carbon dioxide tolerance stabilizes, and the body becomes far less reactive to sudden stress signals. Within a few weeks, the effects deepen further. Many practitioners report that anxiety episodes become shorter and easier to interrupt. Sleep becomes deeper because the vagus nerve is now receiving regular stimulation through slow exhalation cycles. The lungs themselves begin to feel more open and elastic as the lower lobes expand fully during breathing. Remember, the lower portion of the lungs contains the densest network of blood vessels, meaning the body absorbs oxygen far more effectively when breathing from the diaphragm instead of the chest. Zen teachers describe this stage as filling the tanden, the feeling that a stable reservoir of calm energy has formed in the lower abdomen. From a neurological perspective, what you are really building is stronger vagal tone. The vagus nerve becomes more responsive, allowing your heart rate, breathing rhythm, and emotional state to stabilize faster after stress. In other words, your body begins to recover from disturbance more quickly. And once this recovery speed increases, anxiety loses much of its power over you. Now, here is the uncomfortable truth that most people will never admit. The knowledge you have just encountered is not hidden anymore. It is not locked inside temples or guarded by ancient masters. The real barrier is something far simpler and far more dangerous: neglect. Modern life trains your attention to move outward constantly toward screens, noise, notifications, endless stimulation. Your breath becomes shallow without you noticing. Your mind lives permanently in the upper chest and the head, disconnected from the biological center that stabilizes the nervous system. The Zen masters understood this long ago. They warned that when the breath rises upward, the mind becomes restless and fragile. But when the breath sinks into the Tanden, the entire organism reorganizes around a center of gravity that cannot easily be shaken. So the challenge is not learning the technique. You already know it now. The challenge is whether you will actually use it long enough for the nervous system to change. 5 minutes a day is enough to begin the process. 10 minutes accelerates it dramatically. Sit quietly. Drop the breath into the lower abdomen. Let the diaphragm descend and release the exhale slowly, while keeping your attention anchored to and below the navel. Again and again, breath after breath. At first it feels almost too simple to matter. But remember, the nervous system does not respond to complexity. It responds to repetition. What you are doing with every cycle of tandem breathing is reclaiming control over the deepest regulatory circuits of the body. You are strengthening the vagus nerve, stabilizing heart rhythm, expanding lung capacity, and teaching the brain that safety can be generated internally, rather than searched for outside. This is why the practice survived centuries inside Zen training halls and martial disciplines. It works not as a belief system, but as a biological protocol. Most people will read about techniques like this and move on with their day. Their breath will return to the chest. Their nervous system will remain restless, and anxiety will continue whispering in the background of their lives. But if you practice this daily, even for a few minutes, you begin building something rare in the modern world, an internal center that cannot easily be disturbed.